here with retired coach Bill Greiten, most recently of Gillett, following Racine Case and Racine St. Catherine's. Bill is a Hall of Fame coach whose teams have won numerous state championships. Bill, can you talk about your journey into running, beginning in high school, on into college, and then into coaching cross country?
I'm probably one of the rare ones that I never competed on track and field or never competed in cross country till I was in my 20s. I worked all through high school. I worked at construction in the summertime. I was a mason tender at 16. I started working in the stockyards for my uncles when I was 13 every summer. And I came from a family where hard work was the thing more than anything else. And I competed in basketball in 7th and 8th grade in a Catholic CYO league. But other than that, once I was able to start working, I just went out and got a job. And I always had a job from then on. And I finally retired from coaching at 77. But I always had an interest, and my brother was a hurdler and a high jumper at Pius High School. He was a year behind me. But other than that, I just got involved when I went to St. Catherine's. I was hired as an economics and history teacher. And
what year was that?
1964.
Okay.
And they needed an assistant coach in track and field. And I knew some things about it because my brother was involved and I followed it. And from there, the next year I was coaching football and basketball. And I had basketball coach was also the cross-country coach. Well, he quit, and the head track coach was a football coach, and he moved on to a different school, and all of a sudden they were short coaches. Well, guess who's the new head track coach? Talk about inexperience.
So you inherited more than you applied for, huh?
Way more than I applied for, but that was typical in those era. Yeah. You know, it's just part of what you did. I mean, it was all nuns and priests, and there were 5 or 6 lay people, and I mean, every male in the building, what was his first name? Coach. Because if you were teaching or you were coaching 2 or 3 sports, it was just part of the job. And got involved in cross country and was fortunate enough to learn a lot. Went to a lot of clinics, went to a lot of camps, started competing and running myself. And it was always easy for me. As a kid, running was easy. I was always thin, so it wasn't any real chore. And I learned a lot, did tremendous amount of reading, started getting things from Europe, started getting booklets from East Germany that was translated. You know, I was devouring everything I could. I'm an avid reader, so I devoured everything I could. Then gradually after, even a dumb monkey, can find his way if you stick with it long enough and work hard at it. It was kind of a passion.
Well, in those days, there really weren't journals available. There weren't clinics available. There weren't, books. There were no textbook type things. Very few. I shouldn't say none, but.
Tom Rosandich, I don't know if you remember that
man.
Oh,
yeah.
He was the athletic director at Parkside. He ran a Camp Olympia up at O'Brien, at Lake O'Brien, in northern Wisconsin, near Upson. And I went up there for a week. It was a coaching clinic, and he also had athletes up there. And I ran into 3 or 4 people that were influential in my life. Bob Timmons, Ryan's coach.
Oh, yeah.
Joe Newton. Joe and I became fairly good friends. And if you spend a week living in a room with Joe Newton, and he talks till 2 in the morning at about 4,000 words a minute, you can absorb an awful lot. Vic Godfrey, who coached at Parkside, he he left there and was coaching in Bahrain for years overseas in the Arab world. And, he ran across good people, I think. In order to be a good coach, you've got to have passion for what you do. I mean, it's got to be a focal point of your life. In other words, you've got your family, your faith. To me, coaching kept me in teaching. If I hadn't been coaching, I never would have stayed in teaching because of the money. I could have made more money, doing other things. As was obvious in the 60s.
Yeah.
You just didn't get paid. I made more money working construction for 10 weeks during the summer, working road construction, than I made teaching and coaching 3 sports.
Yeah. What years were you at? You were St. Catherine's. You started at 64. What years did you start
I
coaching?
left St. Catherine's in the spring of '69. I started at Case in '69. At 29 years of age, I was at the top of their pay scale. And they were offering us a $50 to $100 a year raise. And Orby Moss was the head coach at Case High School. And he called me up and wanted to know if I wanted a job. So I went down to Unified and I applied at their Unified office, and the superintendent says, we don't have any openings right now. Well, I already had an interview with the principal and was told I had a job, just go fill out the forms. So the one hand didn't know what the other hand was doing.
Yeah.
And that was interesting because Ken Bonson, who was principal at the time, I went in, I had a half-hour interview with him out of Case. And we talked about athletics, we talked about sports, we talked about my philosophy and, what I did with the kids. I got home and 10 minutes later, his secretary was on the phone. By the way, what do you teach? He hired me as a coach.
Yeah.
And I asked him a couple of years later, I said, Ken, how could you do that? He said, I knew you taught at a Catholic high school. He said, I knew you taught at St. Catherine's and their academics were extremely high. He said, I knew you had to be a good teacher. I was more concerned with what you could do for us athletically.
Oh, but that's a great tribute to you and to St. Catherine's.
Yeah, it was. It was a real compliment.
When did Case start as a high school?
66.
Oh, okay.
So I was only a few years old when I transferred over there.
Yeah.
And they only had sophomores, juniors, and seniors. There was no ninth graders in there. We didn't have ninth graders till the middle of the 70s.
Okay.
So when I went in there, I could outrun all of the 2-milers. It was just, the races were only, 2.1 at that time or something like that. And gradually I got kids. It was interesting, the first meeting I had with the kids that went out for cross country, I can still remember I had 17 of them. And we went in and I explained what we were going to do and where we were going to train and what have you. And I said, our first workout will be 8 o'clock in the morning, and our second one will be at 4:30 in the afternoon. And a couple of the seniors on it said, we don't do that. We only work out once a day. And I just said, excuse me? And I explained to them that a dog has a long tail or a dog has a short tail. The tail doesn't wag the dog. I'm the dog. You decide whether you want to be part of this or not. The next morning, all 17 were there. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there were 4 kids there. Next day, and that time we gave them practice gear, practice sweats, and shoes actually at that time. Racine gave them shoes. I cleaned out all our lockers, put it all back up in the track room. They came in and they said, you're not on the team anymore. You don't make those decisions. I figured if I'm going to a new school, you understood the program, you understood what had to be done. And they went to the principal, and the principal said, that's why I hired him. If you want to be on a team, you have to go and ask him. One kid did. No, I let him back on.
Yeah.
But the others, you won't be any good without us. Well, that was in '69. In '72, we were second in the state. '73, we won the state. It took a couple of years to get it going. So I went out in the halls and just combed the halls. Anybody that looked like an athlete, I called them over and talked to them. By the end of the year, I had 12 kids, and then it just grew from there.
Yeah.
I wanted kids who were dedicated, who wanted to be there. Over the years, I've learned one thing. I've watched too many coaches who worry about wannabes, wannabe athletes, but they don't want to pay the price. And I finally, after years of getting half smart, decided I'm gonna work with the doers, not the should-doers.
Yeah.
You always look at a kid, well, he should be better than he is. I'm putting my time with the kids that want to be there, you know, that really want to try. Because in the end, they're the ones that are going to help you, you know. It's not the first place or second best runners. It's the one down the line if they're going to make a team.
Well, you built the culture. That's clearly what you did.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So those are some of the things that, you know, got me involved in it. And then being involved, I mean, in fact, I left St. Catherine's when Pete Hankins was going to be a freshman. You know, he was at my house that summer between 8th grade and Fred, and ran with us. So Pete and I have been friends since he was in 8th grade. Yeah, and we kind of, in Racine, some of the better runners all kind of got together and worked out at Petrifying Springs at Parkside. And summertime, I did all those kind of things. And there's been some bumps along the road. You know, we were at Case High School. We started out in the Big 8 conference, and in 26 years at Case, we were in at least 6 or 7 different conferences. They bounced us from conference to conference to conference.
No, the Big 8, was that the conference that included the Madison?
Sure, Madison, Beloit, Janesville, and Racine and Kenosha. That's what it was.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God.
Then we were in the South Shore. Then we were out with Waukesha schools. Then
Yeah, I remember when, you know, was that the early 90s when it was we had a giant conference, 15 schools.
Yeah, and then they split it, top, this and that.
Yeah, yeah.
And we went through all kinds of different things with the different conferences. And I finally decided, I'm in it for the kids at Case. I really don't give a damn what conference we're in. So the conference didn't mean too much to me. In fact, some of the coaches were very insulted that I didn't pay too much attention to the conference meets and what have you. We had an indoor conference meet at Park High School. We joined that conference during the summer. Contracts had already been sent out for track and all that. Well, I had a huge invitational with 16 schools coming to Case High School for the Eagle Invitational indoors. They assigned the indoor conference meet on Friday night the night before. Well, I had 100 kids out for track. I didn't run any one of my varsity kids. I ran our sophomores, our JV kids. And at that time, one of the coaches from Cudahy came up to me, and I had walked in. I had practiced with the older kids and sent the assistant coach over to Park. And I went over there, and I didn't even know the guy, and he came up to me, "You insulted me." And then, of course, I was not very big, but I got a temper about that big, and I said, "I don't know who the hell you are." I said, you know, and it got a little bit of a verbal thing with him, and "You're not running your best kids." You know, that's an insult to me and to our conference. And I tried to explain it to him. We had all these schools coming ahead of time. This is my fault that we joined later. And he just was madder than can be. And then one of the coaches from Waukesha North verbalized the same thing. So I just bit my tongue. Well, we ended up with 8 schools there. We ended up in 4th place with my JV kids. So we beat half, we were right in the middle. And of course they called the principals, their principals called my principal and all this and that. And there was a little to do about that, but anyway, to make a long story short, that outdoor season, the conference meet was held at Waukesha North. We won the state title in 1984 in track. I unleashed everybody. I took a quarter miler and ran him in 100 to 200 and a quarter, and he won all 3. Because I knew we could win the 16 relay without him. I tripled guys. We doubled the points of the second place team.
Oh my God.
And the guy that had to present the trophy to me was the head coach at Waukesha North. And Manderfield, my assistant coach, Dave, he's standing facing me, and the guy gave me the trophy, and he said, "I wonder if that blankety blank wants to run our varsity again." Knowing the guy was standing right there. It was,
Poetic justice.
You got what you asked for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I made decisions like that
Yeah.
to protect the kids, you know.
Yeah.
And with being in all those different conferences, the conference title, a lot of those conferences had an indoor title.
Or relays.
And then they had a conference meet or a
Yeah.
relay title. And our principal at that time was Jim Coles, who became
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah, Jim,
superintendent. And Jim went to a principal's meeting, and it was brought up that I kind of played down the indoor conference meet. And Jim said, he says, I'm a little ignorant. Who won the conference title? And they said, well, Case did. He said, maybe I hired a coach that knows what he's doing. That ended the principal's discussion.
Yeah.
He backed me to a hilt.
Yeah.
Because he understood where I was. I was for the kids,
Yeah.
you know, not for showing off in a conference or being this or that. Because next year we could have been a different one.
Yeah.
So,
Now, what were the year spans you started at Racine St. Catherine's, but you didn't, when did you start coaching cross and track?
I started coaching cross in '66. I started track in '64.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
So I would coach track from '60. I coached track for what, 53 years, 54
Yeah.
years, all the way to '77, all the way to 217. I never had a break in track. And cross, when I went to Gillett, they didn't have it. And they were getting their butt beat, you know, in the conference meets and in track. They were just getting killed with no distance runners. You know, I was faster than any of them. And that was at 55 years of age. And so I figured we got to do something. So I went to the school board and Bill DeYoung, the head track coach at that time.
Oh, Bill, yeah, I know that.
He backed it up, and we got him to let us start a cross-country program. So I started a cross-country program, and then a couple of years later I got it in the junior high, and just built it from there.
And you had teams going to state within a few years at Gillett.
Yeah, out of all the girls and guys, it took 3 years or so to get it, start from nothing and get it going. I mean, when the first meeting I had, they thought it was cross-country skiing. Kids came,
Yeah.
they thought it was cross-country skiing. So you can see how that
Yeah.
was, you know. And it's like one of my runners in Gillett, he always said, Coach, if somebody's running in town, he's not one of our group, who is he? And I said, I don't know him. And he says, a tourist. In other words, nobody ran in that town. It's just not a running you know, type of area at that time, you know. But those are just some of the things that happened along the way. I think you make decisions. My decision was always, what do the kids want? What do the team want? You know, I put emphasis on big meets. In cross country, some of those conferences had dual meets, and I ran my JV kids on the Tuesdays
Yeah.
because I had my older kids in, you know, huge meets
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
like the one Brian Stanky used to run,
Yeah.
you know, out there, that relay meet,
Yeah.
you know. It just, we went to all big meets, Madison West Invitation, we just went to big meets. I figured if you're gonna have dual meets, you and I know who's gonna win before, we can probably tell you which order they're gonna finish.
And I don't think you get much out of it. You know,
We did.
You know, and it's hard to get the kids to get, you know,
Some of those,
go
some
to
of
the
those
wall to
conferences,
try to win it or anything either, because it just doesn't make sense if they're 200 meters in a lead and then saying, should they kick it home the last 800? I don't know.
so I just didn't do it.
Yeah.
And they, again, it created some animosity with some of the coaches. But I'd go there after we got the program going, I'd go there with my younger kids and we'd still win.
Yeah.
You know, we very seldom got beaten with my younger ones.
Mhm.
Because it's like you were, you had so many good kids, and there were so many so close. Your 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, the time differentiation wasn't very much. I could go on with stories after story after story of stuff that had happened, but
If we go back a little bit now, I know you had state championship teams in cross country and in track at Racine Case. What years were those?
Um,
Was 80s?
That case was, let's see, second in 72, third in 73. No, 73 we won it. 75 we won it. And the last time we won it was 89.
And you beat Logan, I think, because my brother was coaching at Logan, and that was, you beat them, I remember that.
Yeah, we ended up, I can't remember. I know we had 12 or 15 teams in the top 5. And for 20 years, in a 20-year stint there, we were in a state meet as a team for
Yeah.
18 years.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't, the philosophy I tried to get across to them was, it wasn't if we were going. Mentally, you're going to put in the work so we're qualified to go. We may get beat, but you're going to be ready. And I always believed the fact that I'd rather have a kid at 95% than push that extra to get them up to that 100% and then lose one or two.
Yeah.
I always kind of prided myself that at the end of the year, 99% of my runners were still running in cross country. I'd rather have them right there, ready to compete. That was the secret to it.
Yeah.
Having kids ready to compete. You get a few injuries on the team, and then all of a sudden somebody else has got an owie, and then somebody else has got an owie. Well, if he's hurt, I hurt a little bit too. Maybe I shouldn't run. So I felt a healthy team generated a healthy team, and I always tried to, keep it that way. So I'd always back off. I never had, per se, team workouts. I had a workout, but then I'd individualize them for everybody. I couldn't take kids that could run, like in 73, our goal for all 7 runners was only, remember, 2.1 miles. They went through the mile mark anywhere from 4:55 to 5:05. They went through the first quarter at 75. In fact, I used to stand by the quarter mile mark, and I threatened them, I'm going to grab you off the course if you go through there at 65 like some of the leaders. I don't care where you are then. Where are you at the 3/4 mile mark so that you're at 5 minutes? And then if you can run negative splits after that. If you can't hold where you're at. I also believe that when I went to 5,000 meters, run as comfortable as you can and be in position by the mile. Compete the second mile. And then hold your position and then sprint at the end. And it was kind of I created a word for the kids, parasma. Pace, race, M for maintain, and then sprint.
Oh, cool. What were the major changes in the sport you saw over your career? It's maybe a hard one.
Some of the changes that I saw were when I look back at it now, there's not a lot of career coaches. There's not a lot of Arnie Maheys and Mike Mulrooney's, Pat Mulrooney, the Carneys, the Reimers, the Bradleys, Greitens. There's not a lot of those. People are very good. They'll get into it for 5, 6, 7 years, or 8 years, or 10 years, and then they're out of it. And you hear excuses with some of them. Well, I've got a family. And I just look at them. What the hell do you think I had? I had a family. But they become an integral part of who we were. They realized what their dad did. And they realized how passionate he was about what he did. And I think that was part of it. I always figure most coaches who are married, if their wife didn't support them, they wouldn't be as successful as they were. It's just.
Oh, that's an absolute, yeah.
I mean, there's no question about it.
Yeah.
Bradley's wife, my wife. My wife worked every meet. She timed everyone. I mean, indoor, outdoor, you know, the old tick sheets and typing all the results and mimeographing, you know.
Well, speaking of that, it was you and Bob Reimer and Jim Kearney and Joe Vetrano and probably Chuck Bradley. You started the cross-country clinic, the Wisconsin Cross-Country Coaches Clinic. Was that about 1980 or so?
Well, we did it for 40 years and we ended up stopped doing it a couple of years back. It was Joe Vetrano, Bob Reimer, and I that started it. And then we added Jim Kearney and Chuck Bradley. Actually, the first meeting was held at Joe's house. Vinny Vetrano, who was on Channel 4, his son, we had to stop the meeting because he was changing his diapers. We started it because we felt that we could help cross-country in the state by bringing coaches together and sharing ideas. That was the basic premise of it. And
if I'm not mistaken, were you also involved with organizing, helping Jeff Steinbach get the first track Wisconsin coaches?
That was funny. It was, we were at the track clinic in Wisconsin. I always wanted, they always had a track clinic. And we were up there, and they always provided time for us to have a meeting. And it got to be later in the day, and later in the day they provided time. First it was earlier in the day, and we had a block of time. Guys were fresh and willing to listen. And then the last straw.
Oh, Vince.
Vince Lees.
Yeah.
Vince Lees and I and Jeff Steinbach were sitting there, and they announced that the beer party was going to start at 8 o'clock, or you could go to the cross-country meeting. And we got together, the three of us got together and said, and they were bringing, the people that talked at the clinic were people of the teams they brought in to compete against them that weekend. So you had usually 2 schools besides Wisconsin. And then we were clinicians. And we just got together and said, we can do a better job of it. And then we got, and who was Druckery was with us too, Stan. And then we went down and saw the hotel down by the airport, met with them, went around and started putting it together. And obviously the catalyst with all that over the years was Jeff Steinbach. You know, somebody had to be the catalyst. We had several advantages with having that number of guys involved, with 4 or 5 guys. And I had one advantage with dealing with Blue Star Sportswear and Foot Locker, because I was going out to the national championships out for Foot Locker national championships out in San Diego. So people that I ran with out there, I mean, when you're running with somebody and talking to them, Billy Mills is an example. Jeff Steinbach said that he wanted to bring Billy Mills in, and he said, I've been calling his agency or whatever, and he said, I can't get a hold of him. They haven't returned my phone calls. And I said, you want his private number? Of course, he said, Greg, get out of here. I said, you want his private phone number at home. His wife's name is Pat. Call her up, tell her who you are. And he said, you gotta be kidding me. I said, I've been out at Foot Locker. I said, we're both old men. We aren't gonna go out and run some miles with those young kids. So he took us on a tour of where he trained when he was in the Marine Corps in San Diego, up and down the hills and around all of Balboa Park. So I ran with him for a couple of years out there. But he said, if you're ever in Sacramento, give me a call. You know, of course, I got to know guys. You know, I got to know guys down in Texas and some of the winningest coaches in Texas. I brought several of them up, and you know, Joe Vigil. I started all the NAI meets that he won at Parkside. He was a starter. I was firing a cannon, and I got to know Joe at the meetings on Friday nights and that. So I just called him up and asked him if he wanted to come up here. And, you know, he came up for $1,000 and talked, and you know, other places he was charging more than that. but he liked Wisconsin.
Well, and from everything I know of the clinic and the last about 20 years I worked with it, and it was one of these things that the reputation had grown, and that how responsive all of our committee was to the needs of all the speakers, and they spoke so highly of it, and it just fed finding new speakers. And
But think about, and I'm talking about the beginning clinics, but you think about the way it's run now. You think about the last 15 years when people like you were involved and getting the speakers for the distance runners. You think about the specialization that it went to. In each area, they had a key person who was passionate about the shot and discus, or passionate about pole vaulting. And that person had a group of people, or himself or herself, dedicated to making sure that part of the clinic was well run.
yeah,
I mean, it snowballed into like I said, it's just an outstanding group of people in track and field who were passionate about it. You know, and I think that's it. I mean, that was always Pete Hankins' word too. You've got to be passionate about it, and if you are, you're going to be successful. To the level of, I've always had a philosophy, I'm going to do what's right for the kids and what I think is correct at the moment, at the time, with the circumstances. And if I do that, if you don't like me because of it, that's your problem. I don't care. When I look back at all the stories and all the things that happened because of coaching. We've had kids live with us for the summer, you know, because they had no place to go. They were turned 18 and, you know, they were out, so they, you know, spent months with us during the summer. And it was one of those things that my wife baked cookies for everybody and coffee cake at, you know, and we'd run on Sundays. I mean, I probably, over the length of the time, broke every rule that WI had, but I always thought, and I still believe, a lot of rules are made by people who don't really want to spend time with kids. You know, so we did a lot of stuff. We'd run, and my wife would have breakfast for us after we were all done. It wasn't mandatory. If you want to come, I'm going out for a run. And we all ran for Wisconsin Runner during the summer because I competed for them.
oh yeah.
So it was one of those things. But as far as, I don't know what else I can talk about as far as philosophy, or do you have any other questions?
No, I just know you've been a great mentor to coaches everywhere, and when I interviewed Pete Hankins, he kept referring to you and what he learned from you, and you know, I as a coach, I want to thank you. I want to thank you on behalf of, you know, really all the coaches in the state, because you're one of the, I don't want to say pioneers, but in a way, you know, getting the clinics going and the sharing of ideas, and it's just been so impactful to all the coaches in the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah, and when I look back, you know, I don't know if another occupation would have given me the satisfaction, you know. And part of it, I think one of the reasons that I coached, I didn't want to grow up. Let's face it, every one of the coaches, a little boy or a little girl yet, still having fun doing stuff. You know, other jobs. I've had other jobs every summer and doing stuff, and it was work. This was never work. It was a good life, you know, and I think that at 82 years of age, I'm still able to walk and do things. This is a pleasure.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
It was a pleasure for me, and I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy viewing this interview.